Okay. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Joshua Allen Young. I appreciate you being here for our second event of our fourth day of the XR Safety Week. We have a full day of some incredible medical-related talks, and our next speaker, Shafi, is going to get started right now. So Shafi, please introduce yourself.
So hi everyone, and of course a wave to the audience both here on YouTube, wherever you're joining us. It's great to be here actually. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and invitation from the hosting team, Kavya, Joshua, Ryan, all the others. I'm Professor Shafi Ahmed. I'm a surgeon based in London. I'm a cancer specialist for the last 3 decades working on, treating patients with colorectal cancer. That's kind of my day job. And the kind of outside my kind of clinical work, I tend to do a lot of innovation, digital health, and also I've been involved in immersive tech for the past 7 or 8 years. So what I thought I'd do today is share just some of the journey and the stories around XR, includes of course augmented, virtual reality as well as mixed reality. Just show you where we are and where we've come from, and perhaps some of the kind of journeys that I've been on. So I'm just going to just do my emoji. There we are. Next slide. Good. Okay. Let's go back a long, long time ago. Actually, not so long ago. This is 2014, as you can see. Who remembers a Google Glass? Hands up. Yes, of course. It was way ahead of its time, of course. Essentially, it was a powerful camera. Some would call it an AR device very early on, because obviously it had a head-up display on your glasses. I remember when it came out, I decided to teach people using Google Glass, which kind of made headline news, but really heralded a kind of a new way of exposing people around the world to technology, a new way of learning. For me, it was about scaling the way I could teach people around the world. So I used Google Glass, I remember back in 2014, to do a live surgery. This is sorry about the graphic picture for those of you who might feel a bit nauseous. This is what's called a right hemicolectomy, removing part of the colon for cancer. And of course, cancer is motive around the world, it's universal. So I thought if I could teach just a few medical students in my hospital, perhaps I could translate that to more students around the world. So I was the Associate Dean at Bart's Medical School, and I was trying to think about new ways of teaching people around the world, and particularly the art of surgery. So when we did this operation, we live streamed it. Again, that was, of course, very, I guess, forward thinking. It's connecting people. At that time, it was a 3G or 4G connection, and we'd stream live this operation around the world. 14,000 people watched the operation around the world, medical students, trainees, so that we were shown that just by using simple, essentially a smartphone on your head with a bit of AR capability, that we could reach people around the world very simply. So that was just one example of what we did back in 2014, as you can see, and the world, of course, has moved on so much since then. Gonna go for next slide. Okay, you got next slide. And of course, when we did this, we got a lot of interest from other people. And of course, glasses now have become much more sophisticated. Does anyone know who this is out of interest? This is John Scully, the ex-CEO of Apple. You may, of course, you've all heard of him. And of course, he's the guy who sacked Steve Jobs, as you remember in the film, ex-CEO of Pepsi-Cola. So I taught John, who was 70 years of age at the time, back in Dubai, remotely using Google Glasses. And I was thinking, how do I scale this up to a much higher level? And John was quite a good game. And actually, he's got quite good surgical skills. I managed to train him to do simple suturing remotely using glasses. Of course, he was interested in mobile platforms, mobile phones. How do we access people around the world, particularly in India and other places where maybe access is not so easy? So it was really us trying to democratize education on a global level. So I'm just going to move, next slide, please. If we fast forward where we are now, that same kind of application that I was kind of thinking about in 2014 has now moved on 7 years later. The world has moved on. We're now into remote collaboration, remote training. We're on Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and now, of course, in VR spaces, all think about how do we get to the next level, which platform is going to be useful for us in medicine or in other educational platforms to be able to converse, teach on a global scale. So this is actually just this year. So I work with Johnson & Johnson, as you can see. Vodafone, I happen to be their Connect Health ambassador. These are my kind of conflicts I'm telling you now so that you understand where I'm coming from. So I'm their ambassador for 5G and connected healthcare. And so the rods and cones is glasses that you can see, who create a platform around learning. So we streamed an operation using these technologies now, using AR, so you can actually connect, communicate, and do telementoring or teleproctoring using this device here. This is a Gigacube, which essentially allows to amplify signals to 5G capability. And 5G, of course, allows us to showcase very low latency of 0.1 milliseconds and high kind of fast bandwidth, 1 to 2 gigabytes per second download. So it allows you to translate some of this really fast. The reason why it's pertinent because VR itself might be relevant later on with edge computing, with 5G, to be able to get those high speeds to allow us to use VR or XR in the way that it's supposed to be used. So I did this 7 years later, and this was much better. It was much easier. Great example of how now we've moved technology on. Talk about infrastructure. So we talk about XR. Don't think about XR on its own. The world is now about convergence. Some technologies impacting our lives at the same point of human existence. People call it the inflection point for humanity. Certainly the COVID pandemic is how we use technology at a different scale. Whether in fact it's AR, VR, or mixed reality, 5G, mobile 5G, edge computing, quantum computing, AI, deep machine learning, nanobiotechnology, wearable sensors, they're all going to be part and parcel of the healthcare of the future. It's how we create some of those solutions to solve some of our problems. So this is the kind of concept I've been talking about for a while. Slide, please. Thank you. So, if we think about the basic concept of AR, what's the easiest way to approach that in healthcare? Of course, it's the smartphone. We saw, of course, both Apple and the Android systems of AR Core and AR Kit being used to see whether we can create learning material within just a mobile phone. And you remember when we went back to VR only a few years ago, Samsung Gear VR, Gear VR, the Google Daydream, etc., were all based on a smartphone. And that was great in the sense that we could use a smartphone. Everyone has one, it's ubiquitous almost around the world, to be able to demonstrate some of these ideas. But of course, that's gone out of flavor. Now we've got standalone devices, whether it's Oculus Quest or HTC Vive Pro or Pico or others. We've seen now powerful standalone devices. So the phone, sadly, hasn't really given us what we wanted before. But all of us who are in the space had to work with all of these devices. Of course, we see these kind of tools, but now on a smartphone or iPad or whatever, we can actually use some AR and learn, for in this case, is cardiac anatomy and cardiophysiology. So we're seeing now in real time use cases, a number of companies on the world working on mobile platforms for AR. So don't forget about those simple devices that we can now measure and work out how we use them in a different way. Next slide, please. So having done the world's first Google Glass operation in 2014 as a concept, pushing that boundary of what's possible with technology. And that was very much, of course, in its infancy. In 2016, I did the world's first virtual reality operation. I think Divya kindly mentioned in a keynote just a while ago. And Divya, of course, is a great friend and an amazing speaker. So it's great to be on the same stage as her virtually. So in April 2014, I remember we did the world's first VR surgery. It was 360. So we got some cameras in those days, we connected them, and we streamed live an operation. So the idea was that anybody with a Google Cardboard, you remember one of those, and a smartphone, could access a live operation from around the world, showcasing how we democratize education. And of course, that was pushing the boundary to its limits, and it got great kind of global attention. On that day, I think 55,000 people logged in remotely from 140 countries. 4,000 cities to experience this new world that we're living in. So we'd love to be a part of this. How does that work? Let's see whether I can transport myself from anywhere in the world. And we have people from Africa, South America, Asia, whatever you like, coming into my operating theatre at the Royal London Hospital and showcasing that what we can do is empower people more, take away some of the barriers, like you get in conflict zones or war zones, or because of geography or because of lack of resources, how to overcome some of the burden where people deserve very much world-class education. So that was, we called it VR in OR. And of course, that was the first time we did this. This picture, of course, of me when I was it's iconic, isn't it? It's become the face, if you like, of virtual reality over the last 7 years. And I must sell it as an NFT. That's my next aim, right? Because it's so probably quite valuable and I could do well with that. So that's my next aim. That's how NFTs work in selling my assets. So next slide, please. So then created a company called Medical Realities. We were one of the first VR companies in VR, trying to create learning in this environment. As you can see, we've spent time thinking about the experience of learning in VR with menu systems or whatever, going to different parts of an education. So we've done an end-to-end piece. We walk into our VR headset, then you can navigate through learning exercises, and then we recorded over 80 operations, surgical operations in 360, which then you can actually divide small segments to be able to learn in different ways. So you navigate through this portal, click outcomes, and you can see live operations. Can we just go to the next slide, please? So this is kind of, as you get into the operation, which we've now divided into small subsections. There are hotspots. You can take the video link off. You can see what's going on in the operating theatre. And then you can actually navigate as though you're in the operating theatre itself. So obviously that's static. You haven't got the 6 degrees of freedom. But in the future, what we're thinking about is actually doing the whole piece around the operating theatre. So you can walk around it, see what's going on, allowing the full capability of VR to be experienced by anybody around the world. So we've been working on these kind of platforms for a long time. I know that I think Richard Price and Ralph, or in the audience maybe from Health Education England, who've been doing amazing work on promoting all this work across the UK. The UK has been great at trying to understand this better and amplifying those messages. Next slide, please. The next part, once you've learned something on a medical exercise and then seeing it being, seeing an operation, for example, the next part, simulations. It's that end-to-end piece of learning. Hopefully that will shorten the time to train or improve the training requirements and allow more people to see what's going on. During the pandemic, our students, our trainees and doctors haven't been allowed to see as much as before because of the risks of pandemic. Our medical students at Barts Medical School were not allowed to go onto the wards, or indeed see patients who were literally on the front line. So if we'd predicted that 3 or 4 years ago, said, let's think about hybrid models of learning. What else can we create? Maybe XR is a form that we could use. For me, AR, VR, and MR are just natural extensions of learning. We've come a long way from papyrus to books, and then onto online platforms, digital platforms. And AR and VR actually are just extensions of the platforms we can use to offer a hybrid model of education. It's augmenting learning experiences. And so simulation, as you've seen from Divya's example in orthopedics and others, is going to be huge. Look at the World Health Organization. They've suggested by 2030 will be 14 million health workers short across the world. That's nurses, that's doctors, etc. So how do we overcome that burden? Can we train people differently? Can we accelerate training using XR? Maybe we should think about these ideas to be able to fast forward or fast track people through their learning or offer them improved learning. Next slide. So a lot of my work is about global health work. So I've spent, before the pandemic, I went to about 35 countries in about 5 years, working with governments, working with ministers of health, universities, colleges to understand healthcare better, digital health access, trying to make healthcare more equitable and ultimately more affordable. So we took headsets, for example, around the world, Bangladesh, to parts of Africa, and this is Sierra Leone, where they don't have great training. It's pretty limited. So we took the headsets to train the surgeons to perform different operations. So we could teach them using a smartphone. Do you remember the old Samsung Gear VR? A smartphone and our own medical realities app. So we could offer them training. We thought that was, we really got a lot of good feedback on that. They really felt empowered. They could actually either stream live, watch an operation, get trained around the world. This is work we did with Leeds University with a colleague of mine called William Bolton and the research team at Leeds University. So showcasing that even these simple devices could be helpful in democratizing healthcare around the world. Next slide. I mentioned earlier during the pandemic, we had to rethink the model of learning. So what we did is, I didn't show any videos just in case they weren't working today, so I've just got some just pictures and images. So this is the lecture theatre at Arts Medical School. And what we've got here, essentially, during the pandemic, we weren't allowed to them to the ward. So we brought the ward to them. So in here, you've got essentially 400 seats. We had 70 social distance during the pandemic. A moderator at the front who could then relay information through my eyes. I was on the ward, the HoloLens doing ward rounds, seeing patients, transmitted to the lecture theatre, moderation. So then you create a model, a new way of learning remotely. And our patients and our medical students could take histories, examine remotely with me, interact with our patient. They felt they weren't missing out too much. Of course, it doesn't replace face-to-face, but actually it adds value. It augments, it supports education. And that's the key. People think we're going to replace traditional face-to-face. Of course we're not. It's augmenting what we know already. Where does the value of XR come in? Next slide. We're also seeing XR used in surgery. Now, Divya mentioned about surgical navigation, looking at techniques of operating and training simulation. This is a friend of mine from Japan, Maki Sugimoto and his team. I'm not sure if Maki is here today. HoloEyes. We've actually now taken DICOM images, CTs, MRIs in real time, put it onto the patient. This is a patient undergoing liver surgery. You can see the liver anatomy. So theoretically, in the future, if it was good enough, you could be able to navigate through an operation using XR, allowing you to avoid important structures that should not be damaged, or indeed taking out a tumor or a cancer with good margins. It could help you. We've never had help during the surgical operation apart from intuition and judgment and experience. Maybe XR, AI, and those technologies can allow us to be much more precise in the future and also be able to train remotely. Some of these ideas now are being used to do remote telementoring. Next slide. This is me, it's my avatar. Back in 2017, I've always thought about being virtual, being remote, and being able to connect with people around the world. And this is my avatar on a platform created by Atheo, and it's called the Beam platform. And what we did then, we decided to connect me as my avatar with 2 other avatars around the world. So I was in London, there was a surgeon in the Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai in India, also one in America. We converged in that virtual world to be able to converse with images, scans, whatever, doing a live operation at the Royal London. And again, this made headline news. And I always thought this was really the first bits of the surgical metaverse. You know, of course, Meta is very cool now as a name, and of course, Facebook has changed its name to Meta. But 3 years ago, I was thinking, how do we collaborate remotely? Of course, now we've got Teams, we've got Zoom, we're now connected remotely through these platforms. But I was thinking, how do I convert myself as into that metaverse? So this was great. This is what we did. You can see that video from BBC Click, which shows exactly how we did this and how we managed to create an MDT setting live in the OR. Next slide. And then we went one further. Of course, that's avatars. We want to be much more realistic, and we want photo images of people to be more credible. This is their new platform. That was me, of course, during the pandemic, training people around the world about the pandemic using 3D animation, 3D assets, etc. Of course, we're seeing that now in these kind of platforms like AltspaceVR, Spatial.io. Arthur is a great little platform that we've been using recently around how we create that. And in January, I'll be doing the UK's first full lecture in VR at our medical school, so that we can actually now be able to train the future generations of doctors in this space. So I'll share that with you, of course, in January as we're planning at the moment. Next slide. And of course, last thing is about holograms. How do you now use avatars, holograms? I've done a lot of holographic presentations around the world, literally appearing as a hologram disappearing. Again, showing the benefit where mixed reality is coming in. If you look at the original HoloLens demonstration by Microsoft around holographic interpretation, we get almost close to actually delivering that idea, where as a hologram you can appear. This was me as my hologram, created from mixed reality devices, using 5G technology so that we can transmit it remotely very quickly. And of course, the future is going to be that more of that remote collaboration as we enter that world that we call the metaverse. Next slide. The last one. That's good. So I thought I'd just take you on a brief journey of my experiences over the last 7 years of where we were 7 years ago. You remember when the Oculus was first released, with that device tethered to a computer that gave you terrible nausea and sickness. We've got now the mobile device using 6 degrees of freedom, mixed reality device allowing you to interact remotely, collaborate, connect, and now we're here together in this virtual space. What a journey that's been. So healthcare itself is well designed to be disrupted in 2021 and beyond. And what we're seeing now is we are thinking really outside the box. How do we bring some of these ideas to the market, to enable people to have better understanding? I think, this whole concept of training, education, simulation is well suited to the world of XR. Thank you very much. I hope that was useful to you to share my personal story and journey, as well as showing you where the future might lie. And I think we've got about 7 minutes, I think, for some questions, if that's helpful. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, absolutely. We definitely have some time. Thank you for sharing all that experience. It's fascinating to hear the history of this, so to speak, going all the way back to Google Glass. Honestly, this is some of the most exciting parts of XR for me is the potentials in this space. So it's just really incredible to see the ways that this can revolutionize healthcare in a big way. So, well, okay, great. So we do have a few minutes for questions. We're going to kind of use the emoji system. So if you can raise your hand, I'll call on you and then I'll amplify you so everybody can hear you. So does anybody have a question? Or just use the emoji if you have one. Okay. Well, I guess we don't have any questions.
No problems. Okay. Oh, there's a question over there, I think.
Oh, right here. Okay, Ellie. Okay, Ellie, give me 1 second. I'll amplify you. Okay, Ellie, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask about, I guess many people do have difficulty at this time with VR in terms of nausea and discomfort. So how are we going to deal with that as a barrier to making this more universally accessible?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, obviously, things have got better over the last 7 years. With all the technology around eye tracking, etc., seamless movements, high bit rate, etc., it has improved immeasurably. The other thing, of course, is how much time can you spend in VR? That's the other thing, of course. How much time do you recommend? And remember when we first came out about 4 or 5 years ago, there was consensus saying you shouldn't spend more than 20, 30 minutes at a time. That was the idea to stop you having problems or the sensation of nausea and other kind of problems you're having. So I think we've got to set that in stone of what's actually reasonable. How much time do we recommend? How much time do you need to rest so that everyone has a certain, maybe the XRSI, this whole society needs to think about actually what do we recommend as the minimum requirements to get good learning without getting those symptoms. Another thing I think is about, technology is now improving so rapidly, we're now seeing much better real imagery. So part of it is the kind of how do you create real life-like experiences you get in there. That'll improve to a certain extent. Devices became much cheaper, of course, and that helps. In terms of comfort, I think they are getting more comfortable. It's still sometimes a little bit uncomfortable as you adjust things. But again, I think we need to work on the ergonomics more. I agree with you. I think we're at a stage where you can keep it on for a long while without getting fatigue or feeling some pressure around your forehead or your head or whatever. So I think now that we've got good hardware, maybe we need to spend time on the ergonomics, the comfort going forward. And we're spending a lot of time and effort on that. So if we are going into this metaverse and decide that we can use it longer term, let's make it really comfortable, effortless, lighter, so that it's easier. People talk about, so if you make it lighter, for example, that's an advantage. And then the work I do with telephone communications, we're moving on to edge computing. So if you take out the stuff to edge computing, take away a lot of the power and the weight of a device, it suddenly becomes lighter. Maybe we need to move away from having everything on the headset, moving it to the cloud or locally to be able to do that computing, if we can actually have less weight on your head. So these are kind of things I think we should think about, and I absolutely agree. If it's here for the long term, it has to be fit for purpose and comfortable.
That was a phenomenal answer. Okay, I see BR in the background that you had a question. Give me 1 second and I'll amplify your voice. Okay, please go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon. Great presentation. I wanted to ask about, for the neurodiverse community, how can this, VR help them? and especially who have learning difficulties. Have you seen any use cases which can really help this community in terms of either therapy or education?
That's a really good question. Yeah, a really good question. What we don't want to do is create a divide. And with threat of technology, always there's that kind of risk of creating divide, whether it's having access to a smartphone, access to connectivity. We're seeing that more common during the pandemic. We are seeing actually rehabilitation. So, for example, I think Divya mentioned people with strokes, for example, as an example, who are debilitated by lack of movement. To rehabilitate those, people are now using VR therapy tools. So you can think about those people also having limitations in terms of physical ability. So take that, extrapolate that to people who don't have that, who have disability, may be an answer or a solution. We've also seen even elderly people who may not really want to engage with technology as much as we assume, who go into these headsets and actually are transformed. I remember a few years ago, there was this great VR tool called Walking Through Dementia, aimed at patients with dementia and also people who don't have dementia to understand dementia better, be able to understand, go through this whole environment. I hope that would help and support them through their disability. So I think it has the potential to improve people's lives, even with disability, be able to democratize some of the things we're talking about. Again, that's work that needs to be carried out and extrapolated, and some research and trials need to be done to validate that. I think it could be the enabler, it could be the equalizer of a lot of things that we don't have access to from before. And you remember, disability, there's a device that allows people around the world who have blindness. I remember this great device, I think through Peak Vision, I can't remember the name, to allow you to use an AR device to see much better. Never solved the problem of blindness around the world. Using some AR devices, suddenly are using that to be able to give people vision back. So actually, let's think outside the box. Some of these people who didn't have the ability to do certain things could have it if we think much wider and just to step outside the envelope. I think how this technology could be applied to them.
Phenomenal answer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shafi. Unfortunately, we do not have time for any more questions. We have another talk coming up right now, actually. If you, let's see, if you want to join that talk, you simply enter the room code XXG276. That's XXG276. We're going to pop over there and get that started. But I just want to take a moment to thank the NHS and thank you, Shafi, for being a part of this event. It's been such an absolute pleasure. You're welcome to hang out in this room and keep interacting if you want, or definitely encourage you all to join us in the next room as we get started with our next speaker. So thank you again, Shafi. This was absolutely fascinating talk. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Okay, Neil, can you see the slides on the stage?
I can see the slides, Josh. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. And everybody else in the audience? Yes. Okay, great. Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, give us 1 more minute, Neil, and we will get started. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Spinning around.
You're getting good at that. How are we doing? You should have. Burton, Matt, and quite a few others who have helped make this day possible. And our next talk, as long as I can get a confirmation from Matt that we're good to go, Matt? All right, we're good to go. Excellent. We're live streaming to YouTube, so thanks for everyone tuning in both here on Altspace and YouTube. We've had a wonderful full day of just some incredible medical XR content. And up next, we have Neil Ralph from the NHS, who's going to share with us his perspective on medical XR. So Neil, please introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Thank you very much, Josh, and hello everybody. It is lovely to be here supporting XR Safety Week. So as Josh mentioned, my name is Neil Ralph and I work within England, part of our National Health Service. And I'll want to tell you a bit about what we're doing at a national level within England to support the way we educate and train our healthcare workforce, and particularly what we're looking to achieve through accelerating and scaling the adoption of XR technologies in support of that. So some of you might be familiar with the National Health Service in England. This is a nationalised, tax-funded healthcare service that provides care to our 60-odd million population within the country, from primary care through to secondary and tertiary care, meeting all of our healthcare needs. And it's costs about taxpayers about 140 billion a year we invest into delivering the National Health Service, and that supports us across between 300 and 350 acute hospitals spread out across the country and many thousand community and primary care services. And working within the NHS, we've got about 1.4 million staff across about 350 different roles. A large proportion of those will be in our roles delivering clinical care across our different doctor specialities, nursing specialities, allied health professionals, people working in psychological therapies, which is my background, and many other supportive clinical roles as well. And it's quite critical that we are making sure that people across all of those different roles have the skills, knowledge, behaviours and attitudes that we need to deliver effective care, and that we have a continuous supply of newly qualified clinicians being made available to that workforce to continue to support it, both its expansion, but also to, of course, replace people who leave working in their different clinical roles. And so I work with an organisation called Health Education England, and that's one of a number of national bodies. Health Education England's focus is specifically on making sure that we have the supply of workforce that we need, again, with regards to the different roles that are required, but also where we need them to meet demand across the different locations, across the different hospital settings, etc., spread out across the country. And we do that by providing education and training to support them through commissioning our universities or through managing the training of doctors who are newly qualified going into their postgraduate education into their different medical specialities. And within Health Education England, I lead a team, a specialist team that is focused on how we can support the way we train and educate through the application of learning technologies and simulation-based education approaches. Now, across the last 18 months, through the course of the last 18 months, you'll all be terribly familiar that the COVID pandemic has had a particularly pernicious impact on all aspects of the way we're able to effectively deliver healthcare. And one of those areas that's been significantly impacted has been our ability to train and educate people. People who have been within their education pathways have been pulled into needing to be part of the workforce on the front line delivering care, either to being pulled into a significant expansion of critical care, or being pulled into supporting vaccination rollout, or being pulled into supporting the recovery of clinical care, has been attempting to recover things like elective surgery or cancer diagnostics, etc., getting back on track and meeting all the other breadth of healthcare demand needs that, of course, do not stop because we're in the midst of a pandemic. So, alongside this, we've also had the need to continue to implement government mandate objectives, for instance, and ambitions, which are all about how we can, lots of them are about how we can continue to reform, we train and educate people, again, striving towards attracting people into clinical roles and enabling them to acquire the skills that they need to work within modern day healthcare, and equipping them for what that means in terms of future skills that are coming, that we need to start to build the foundations of as we move towards an increasingly technology enhanced way of delivering healthcare. And so not just the ability to, we're not just trying to address the needs to recover education and training in the very short term, but we also have the need to implement new ways of training the education to address those future skills requirements, but also to expand our training capacity as well, so that we can try and increase the number of doctors and nurses and people across those roles, because as we're all familiar, and this is a global issue, that healthcare demand is going in only one direction, and the challenges to develop and provide that workforce and get that in place to deliver that care is increasingly becoming more and more challenged. So the work within our technology enhanced team, the team that I'm in charge of, we've got a number of things that we're trying to achieve as sort of high level objectives with the work that we do with regards to learning technologies and simulation. That's one to point out here is how can we support the system to increase placement capacity. We're limited by the number of supervisors, mentors, education faculty that we can have in place at any one time, but how do we build efficiencies into the system so that we can expand and enhance those placements and increase the amount of clinical exposure that they're getting whilst they're within training, either undergraduate or postgraduate education. But equally, how do we continue to enhance that experience? How do we facilitate them to gain the knowledge, skills and competence that they require, but to do that in a way that increasingly removes the friction from that experience, both with regards to educators, but also with regards to learners. And through the course of doing those two things, how do we make sure that we're continuing to strive to improve learning outcomes and enhance the both that experience of education, but especially in terms of the ability to continue to improve on patient safety. We see that a really important role for the use of XR technologies in supporting us to achieve those ambitions. We're really, really excited, to be honest, about the potential of XR to both really enhance that learning experience, really enhance the ability to acquire and to sustain new skills and knowledge in our learners, but also and critically as well to really expand that training capacity, the ability to acquire clinical experiences. There's a number of examples here through which we're seeing some great applications of XR technology. I know many of you have been in previous talks which have gone into some detail through the day around different applications, and some of those that you're seeing on the screen here might be familiar. We're seeing, for instance, just from working across from the left, some great applications of the HoloLens, for instance, using technologies like remote assist to be able to broadcast ward rounds or patient consultations out to learners. There's good examples of how this has been used within COVID hot environments, which has enabled people to bring in more junior colleagues into that clinical space without exposing them to the risks of being around patients who are COVID positive, but also making that experience more comfortable for patients as well, yet not diminishing and in fact actually enhancing that as a learning experience. And fabulous to applications of that technology, being able to bring in some of those additional bits of information such as x-rays or DICOM images into that viewing space for those on the receiving end of the consultation, maybe who it's being streamed to, but also the clinician who's engaging with the patient in the room as well. We're also sort of, if you look within the middle there, seeing some further, I think, really interesting applications. This is again using Microsoft and their HoloLens and using their Microsoft Guide application within that. And this is an example from an innovation at the University of Michigan, which is where they've created a standardized approach to teach lumbar puncture in this example here, using mannequins, but bringing in that mixed reality capability on top of those, and being able to take learners through the ability to practice learning how to gather those skills, gain that mastery around, in this case, doing lumbar puncture. Now, what that's meant for them and what we're seeing in England is interest in being able to basically have multiple learners, excuse me, multiple learners at any one time, taking huge weight off of education faculty, but being able to really, scale up the throughput of learners, but at the same time also facilitating them to have great consistency in terms of the procedural approach that they are being walked through, for instance, again, within this case of doing a lumbar puncture. And then the last one on this last example on this page is where we've working actually with some of our national programs around supporting in this case, people learning skills to work with new mothers who may have perinatal mental health problems, and how can we in this case is how we can use an immersive experience with a standardized patient avatar to train clinicians and healthcare workers and social care workers to be able to learn how to effectively have a consultation with somebody who's presenting potentially with some mental health problems, in this case, post having given birth. Now, this is a really neat example using some technology developed through a company called JoinXR, Project Agrios, this is called. And this is enabling us to run those consultations through that immersive experience. And in this case, using the JoinXR platform, we can have multiple individuals located within that immersive experience. So you can turn that into a really, a multi-user learning experience. We're looking at the application of that immersive learning environment for how we might train our general practitioners, as well as a multitude of different staff, as we immerse them in all different learning scenarios. Thank you, Josh. So we're looking to scale what we're doing and at some pace across the country. We're looking to encourage our educators to integrate XR technologies in the way that they educate and train, and to expand their horizons around the potential of enabling us to do things differently and to gain all the sorts of benefits that you're aware of. And as we do that, we're incredibly mindful that working as a national body, we've got a responsibility to ensure that we are putting in place the sorts of structures and parameters that we need to have to ensure that quality is being managed, that we're getting a level of consistency in terms of the way that people are applying and using these technologies. And we also see these technologies as being part of a suite of techniques and technologies that can be applied within that stimulation approach. And to help us make sure that we're managing a level of consistency and we're bringing people with us and we're enabling those sort of quality structures to appear, we produce a range of policy documents and guidance documents. And there's an example on the screen here. So, a few years ago, we produced a national framework for simulation-based education. And more recently, we've published a strategic vision for how we see the need to scale the adoption of immersive tech within that simulation approach, but also opening up to decision makers around the system who may not be familiar with simulation and immersive technologies, where we might see some real benefits if we start to integrate those practices into those areas. Now, we don't just have great ambitions in this space, and we're not just able to to identify certain great case studies, of which doing that is very useful because it helps us raise awareness and pique people's interest. And we don't just publish guidance and policy in this area as well. We've seen that there's a real need to create capacity in the system to develop the ability for colleagues around the NHS in all their different settings to be able to access the hardware and the software applications, to be able to start to test out and to gain confidence and capability in how they might adopt XR technologies in the way we train and educate. It won't just happen overnight. The NHS is a very fragmented system, although it's centrally funded through tax. It's still very much a federated system where institutions and bodies have their own budgets and make their own decisions in terms of how they might spend that money. And that's included on how they might go about adopting different ways of training, educating people that they're responsible for. But not all organizations have deep pockets, have significant budgets that they can bring to bear to, whether it's about dipping their toe in the use of XR technologies or developing and investing in enough equipment to be able to effectively integrate that into their educational approaches. So we've created an offer to the NHS where we've invested in a central repository of XR technologies, of XR hardware, and the ability to bring in a range of applications that have efficacy in supporting healthcare education and training. And this is what we've coined our XR hubs. So really what we're describing here is a virtual library where organizations around the NHS can pull down, can access through a loan arrangement the technology that best meets their educational needs, and we can support them in that application. So they are either getting exposure to the benefits of XR, they're learning how it best operates within their environment, or we're supporting them to overcome the barriers to be able to effectively integrate that into practice. But more importantly, where it comes down to the its efficacious application within healthcare education, its delivery, we're supporting them in thinking about how we get that pedagogical effectiveness, how we integrate that really effectively into that learning environment. It's also enabling us to generate evidence at some scale as well. So a precursor to being able to being allowed to access the technology and bring that into their own environment is that they need to agree to also evaluate its utility and to give us some feedback on the benefits that it brings, but also help us understand some of the barriers of adoption as well. Now, a few more slides from me, and just to cover off some things that we think are critically important really in terms of being able to see that safe, efficacious adoption of XR technology at scale across England, across the NHS. We know that we can't, it's not just about putting policy in place and enabling access to the kit itself. It's also about making sure that our educators and our educational faculty have the confidence and the capability they need to bring that into that educational environment effectively. And so there are a few things that we're looking to do to really maximize, or at least build a foundation of knowledge and skill across the country, so that we can maximize that efficacious, that safe integration into practice. So we're doing that through some faculty development initiatives. We're developing a national faculty development program, which is looking to raise the bar, raise the fundamental knowledge that we have in place around safe use of simulation and how you effectively use simulation, and in this case, how you bring in those XR technologies to help them to do that. Alongside how we support our educational faculty, we're also supporting our technicians as well. So simulation is best enabled through knowledgeable educators, but also through our technicians who need to have the skills they need to manage that simulation environment. And in this case, we've got, we've got to be supporting our simulation technicians to feel really confident and skilled in bringing XR technologies into play as another medium through which they can support simulation through. And what we're also hoping to achieve through that is not just are they able to bring that technology into their own environment, not just are they able to understand how they can support learners and educators to use the different applications that are available. We're also interested in how we can support them gaining that the confidence to create their own content over time, and understanding what locally created content, what it needs to make locally created content whether that's 360 video or starting to create CGI content themselves, and how at a local and regional level they might start to develop and really expand the capability to be able to enable them to do that, to further enhance really the opportunities. Moving on to in fact, oh, I thought I was on that slide. Apologies, folks. We'll move on to the next one, Josh. So I mentioned before that alongside, well, to enable us to effectively support the adoption of XR technologies, we need to make sure that it's effectively working within the different environments where it's going to be utilized. And we've got quite a variability across the National Health Service estate in terms of the level of sophistication of that IT infrastructure. But what we do have is a huge amount of energy and will to continually to improve that. Now, there's a lot going into supporting, enhancing that IT infrastructure around that around our clinical care systems. And quite rightly, they are getting the majority of the focus and investment. But we also want to make sure that the education environment is effectively keeping up. If we've got high expectations of the use of learning technologies and XR technologies, we need to make sure that it's going to be working effectively within whatever environment that our learners are going to be placed within. And so to support us in that, we're developing a technology enhanced learning maturity model. And we're working with organizations across the NHS to benchmark their levels of maturity against this scale and to understand where those barriers are to effective adoption of learning technologies, where those barriers are to being able to make sure that XR technologies are going to be usable within the environment. And of course, critical to this is to make sure that that includes being mindful of the necessity to be responsible for cybersecurity and maintaining that integrity of any data that's being captured through that usage. One of the last things I wanted to share with you is a little bit of information around what we're doing to put a further wrap around, I suppose, our ability to support that safe adoption at scale with regards to XR technologies. And that's how we want to use our national learning platforms to help us with that. Due to the, I think the rather, I suppose, in some ways, the unique makeup of the NHS, we have the ability to deliver a number of systems comprehensively across the country to support clinical delivery and support education. And my team is responsible for an aspect of that. We have a number of national learning management platforms that we are in charge of, and we continue to build and develop for the NHS. And we've got about 2 million learners that we support through our national platforms across all the different organizations. And our latest platform, our latest initiative around how we can keep enhancing the sort of capability and functionality we bring to bear through these through our national learning platforms is the Learning Hub, which is going to be the center of comprehensive learning ecosystem for health and care in the near term. And we're going to gradually improve the capability and functionality. We deliver that over time. One of the things we want to build into this is the ability to share and disseminate XR content. If we're going to see, again, successful adoption at scale, we want to make sure that we're enabled to, we want to support collaboration and sharing across the system of innovative content, bring people together to create content together themselves, and make sure that we get maximum efficiencies of all the effort and investment that's made into any content at any one time. And we see the Learning Hub playing a really important role in supporting us of doing that. And that may be it might be Microsoft Guides, for instance, or sharing 360 videos or rendered 3D models, all sorts of different content is going to be shared via that out to all of our learners and educators. So thank you very much for listening to me today. It's been a really interesting experience presenting with within this space. It's been an interesting day for me. I had some technical problems, and I was also juggling trying to create some responses to some national system leadership within the NHS. So I appreciate my delivery this afternoon or today for you was a little bit stop-start, but I hope you've taken away some interesting messages about some of the ambitious plans that we've got within the NHS and what we're trying to support from our national role within our technology enhanced team at Health Education England.
Thank you so much, Neil. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and present with our audience, both here live in Altspace and on YouTube. And we really appreciate the support of the NHS and everything that you've done to contribute to XR Safety Week. Yeah, it's just been phenomenal. That was a really informative talk. We actually have, starting here just in about 1 minute, a panel hosted by NHS. We have really amazing 5 panelists that are going to be exploring a world-class ecosystem for XR in the NHS. So I'd highly recommend everybody to pop over to that room. If you need the room code, it is AFX038. That's AFX038. You just go to the title screen and then enter that code AFX038 to pop over there. We're going to jump over there pretty quick. So we'll see you all there. Thank you again, Neil. Really, really phenomenal talk. Very